I'm going to focus on some of the lectures we've had since the last evaluation for part 2 of this video. And I've noticed that we've had a few, it seems like we've had a few more lectures in this last kind of chunk of time than we did before the first evaluation. And I found that sometimes they're a little bit of information overload and kind of like I'm not really sure why we're learning what we're learning that day. I'm having trouble sometimes distinguishing the flow between what we did the day before and what we're learning that day. But at the same time, I said this in the last video. I like the comfort kind of a lecture class and knowing what to expect and just being able to sit there and listen to a professor who knows what they're talking about tell me what I need to learn. So focusing on a couple that we've had, the first one was on February 1st, and we were supposed to do an article. We were supposed to read an article about moods and music. And this lecture, to be honest, I really just didn't quite understand it. We spent a lot of time like talking about our mood we were in, and I don't know. I didn't really understand how it was kind of. We didn't really get into detail on where where the professor was going with it. So, but at the same time, I will say that I find psychology and music, the whole idea of it, very fascinating, and I think that the fact that music affects us in such a psychological way is really interesting. So I wish we would have done a little bit more with that article than what we did. And I also appreciate the fact that we talked about canonism that day. At that point, I was a little bit confused as to what it was, and then after discussing it, things became a bit more clear. So then we moved on to the lecture on February 6th, and it was a kind of a joint lecture with February 6th and February 8th, and we were talking about additions. And the concept of these lectures was good because I didn't really know anything that I was going to do for this score evaluation assignment, and it was definitely a lot of information. It was good information, but um, the fact that actually the professor herself talked the next day about how she had used the lecture from February 8th in 2009, and she used to lecture like that every single day. And she realized, looking back, at how there was way too much information on the slides. It was kind of all over the place, which is sort of what I got from it too. It was nice to see a professor actually notice that. And so, as far as how it was applicable though to the assignment, I was glad to see that we were actually learning something that we would be able to then put to use in something we were doing for marks. And the last lecture I'm going to touch on is the one on February 15th, which was the day we actually handed in the evaluations. And I kind of found this lecture a little bit random too. I didn't really know exactly where the professor was going with it at certain times, but there was one part I liked specifically that was when the professor showed us some words that sounded pretty scholarly and were big and smart, and they really had quite simple meanings. So that was just sort of cool to see how they can be used in our musical speech, I guess, and they really don't have that um, intricate of meanings as they seem to maybe have. As far as an overall view of the lecture, I would say that yeah, like I said, I do enjoy them in the sense that I like when I'm able to just kind of sit back and listen. And even though I've had kind of little criticisms about each of the lectures, I do think that the overall structure of the way the professor lectures, the fact that she uses lots of pictures and stuff, I do like that as far as the how she presents them to us.